this tutorial, we're looking at the conversation step in the quest system of the Space Virtual World platform. We've already set up a quest with a quest NPC. Now I'm going to start the quest with a cutscene introducing players to the NPC and giving them some information. So in the drop-down box at the top of the step, I choose Type Conversation. I give the step a name, a description and a hint. The hint appears in the sidebar in the UI and is particularly useful for users during interactive steps where they may need a permanently visible note outlining what they need to do. The conversation step lets me tell a story using written dialogue, audio files, camera positions and animations deployed both on non-player characters and the player themselves. So first, I'm going to create an actor in the step, which in this case is going to be my initial NPC. Again, it could be any object in the scene that I attach a quest NPC component to. I'm giving it a name which will appear as the name of the character in the dialogue panels of the conversation step. I can have as many NPCs as I want to as actors in my step. But for this step, I'm just going to add one more actor, which is the player themselves. To denote my second actor as the player, I first put %player, all uppercase, percentage, in the character name. This will then use the player's avatar name for any dialogue that I assign to them. I tick isPlayer so that any actions associated with this actor in the step, playing animations or lip-syncing audio files, are associated with the player's avatar. And this also changes the NPC object field to a Move to Location field, which gives me the option to move the user to a specific location. This is optional. You can leave them where they are during the conversation step if you want to. But I want to focus some camera shots on the player and I want to play some specific animations on them. So I'm going to move them to a location so that I can compose my shot and ensure that they're in frame. The object that I want to put into the Move to Location field is just an empty game object. So in the hierarchy of the scene, I go to Create an Empty Game Object. I'm going to call it Player Position 1, and I'm going to move it to stand in front of the non-player character. I set the Tools Handle button at the top of the editor here to show local. It means the blue arrow on my empty game object denotes the direction the player will be facing. Now I want to make sure the object is on the floor because it represents where the player's feet will be during the step. I add it to the location field. Now I have two actors and I'm ready to add a series of dialogues to the conversation. I click the Add Dialogue button and open the extra options on the dialogue. In the Actor drop-down box at the top of each dialogue, I can now choose from the actors I've defined above. For my first dialogue, I'm going to stick with the non-player character. Now I can add text, animation, a camera angle and audio. These are optional depending on how you want to tell your story. But assuming you want to use text, you'll need to add an additional component to your scene from the project. Search the project for the Cutscene Dialogue canvas. You'll see a prefab. Drag it from the project window to the scene hierarchy window. This object is a screen space canvas. A screen space canvas puts text, buttons, images and other elements onto the user's screen, like a HUD or other UI elements, irrespective of where the user's camera is looking. You might find yourself creating all sorts of canvas elements for custom parts of your quests or other projects, but this one is formatted specifically to work with the conversation step in the quest system. Because it exists in screen space, you don't need to position it in the scene. In fact, you want to avoid moving it at all. I dragged it into the hierarchy window, not into the scene itself, and its position, if I highlight it and click F while hovering over the scene window, you can see is set to 0, 0, 0 in the scene against its corner here, and it's a gigantic panel when seen in the editor window. When it gets in World, it's rendered on a separate layer and applied to the user's camera. Incidentally, the default design of this panel fits with our standard user interface, but you can replace the background image and the button style with your own game UI. If you're on our white label grid, you can replace our entire user interface with your own. If you're the sort of person who likes organizing your scene objects into groups using parent game objects like folders in the scene, be careful if you child the cutscene dialog canvas or any screen space canvas to a parent object. Make sure the parent object is set to 0, 0, 0 location and rotation in the scene. Otherwise, the canvas will be offset and may be invisible to the user. Now that you know where it is and what it looks like, you can pretty much leave it alone in the scene. If you open it, you will see there's a child element called the panel. You need the parent object to be enabled, but you want the panel to be disabled. That's unticking this tick box in the top of the inspector. When something is disabled, you will see that the child elements are grayed out in the scene hierarchy. The panel will automatically be enabled and disabled at the start and end of each conversation step in any quest in your region. You only need one cutscene dialog canvas, and it will only appear for people during a conversation step at the time they do the step. If you leave the panel enabled by default, by accident, it will be visible at all times to everyone in the region. With the cutscene dialog canvas in the scene, I can now come back to the quest steps, and I know that the text I write in any of the dialogues in this conversation step will be visible to the player. The quest I'm going to build in this set of tutorials leads the player into a timed racing game. So in the opening dialogue, I'm using the non-player character to challenge the user to enter the game. Now I have two options for how the user progresses past this dialogue. I can tick Wait to continue, and then the user will need to click to continue, or I can untick that and set a time in seconds, after which the step will move on automatically. Generally speaking, I tend to require the user to click on. It puts more control in their hands. They might read fast and skip through the dialogues rapidly, or they might take their time. I tend to untick and set a time in seconds only if I have a really specific animated event in the scene that I need them to see before the game moves on, like a portal opening or a new character entering the story. For general exposition like this, I let the user click on at their own rate. For this dialogue, I'm also going to add an animation, which will play on the NPC as the NPC is defined at the top of the dialog box. The asset you drag into this field is an individual animation track from within an FBX file in your project. If you watch our gestures tutorials or look at the gestures documentation on the wiki, you can see you need your FBX file to be set as humanoid, assuming your NPC is a human character, and for a gesture playing in the cutscene, you probably don't want the animation to loop. Using an animation is optional, but because I'm using one for this dialogue, I also want to make sure my user sees the animation, so I'm going to add a camera position as well. Creating a camera position is the same as the player position above. I just create an empty game object in the scene. I'm going to name it NPC Cam 1. Again, the blue arrow on the empty game object determines where the player's camera will look. To get a good camera angle, I'm going to move my viewer in the editor to the view that I want. Now, I highlight the NPC Cam game object in the hierarchy. And now I go to Game Object in the top menu and I come down to Align with View. I can also hit Ctrl-Shift-F. Now, if I pull my camera back, I can see the NPC Cam 1 game object is where I want it, looking at the NPC. I go back to the quest step and open the camera field in the dialog by clicking the circle to the right. Now I grab the NPC Cam 1 from that dialog. Remember that the user's aspect ratio might be different to the one that you see in your editor view. You can get a better handle on what your player will see if you set the game window in the editor to a fixed aspect ratio by clicking the drop-down box here. Now, when I press play and initiate the quest, you can see I get the dialog panel appearing when I initiate the quest, and my camera has jumped to the location I defined. I click continue, and that ends the quest, as I have no further steps. I'm actually going to move the camera position a bit. I find that I always need to come in a bit closer than I thought to get a good close-up on the NPC or the player. I can add an audio file to the dialogue too. I have pre-recorded audio for this step. And I tick the Use Lip Sync, and now my NPC's mouth will be animated by the audio file. Please note this only works for our avatars and won't work if your NPC is a full replacement costume. Again, all of these components, the animation, the camera position and the audio effect, are optional. You really only need the dialogue text itself to progress users through your story. Now I'm ready to move to my next dialogue step. I click to add dialogue and I automatically get a duplicate of the last dialogue in the series. Incidentally, if I click to delete dialogues, it will also delete from the bottom up. You can have a maximum of 20 dialogues in one conversation step, but if you need more in a single cutscene, you can just add another conversation step and they'll progress seamlessly to the user. From the actor drop-down of my second dialogue, I'm now selecting the player. I can enter my text, my camera angles and my animations. As a good bit of housekeeping, I've also got into the habit of childing my camera angles and even the player position object to the NPC, so I can move the NPC around and not lose the camera angles. If you look at this NPC, you can see I have 3 camera angles looking at the NPC, a player position in front of the NPC, and 3 camera angles looking at the player. Now I can move the NPC anywhere in the scene. I can duplicate it and use a different outfit for a different character later in the story. I can drag the prefab with the camera angles into my project and use it as a template for future NPCs. It means that as I build new cutscenes, I have a range of preset camera angles to choose from. It makes it easy for me to rack out dialogue steps that have a feel a bit like a comic book frame. The user progresses through short lines of dialogue at their own pace, with a new shot revealed each time they move forward. Sometimes those changing camera shots are not revealing anything new, they're just change for change's sake, rather like the constantly changing camera shots you would see during a conversation in a movie. And then sometimes you cut to a very specific shot to reveal something important to the player, their next goal or the path they need to walk down. In the next tutorial, I'll look at the first type of action step, the visit location step, which requires the user to go to a specific location before the quest continues.